welcome to another up close video. So today's one is looking at Tonic Stamp Club number 7, which is the I Love You Very Much set of stamps and the coordinating dies to go with it as well. For this month we have got coordinating dies for practically every stamp. The only ones that are missing are this solid stamp here, because you actually have two solid dies that you could use instead of a solid stamp, but you can also use this one to create a nice background as well. And also these two little stamps don't have a die to go with them because they're more like a sprinkling of little stars or magical fairy dust to go in a background, or a little shining kind of the little directional lines that could go around this one's magic wand. So those ones don't have dies, but all of the other stamps have a coordinating die to go with them. Some of the other dies, like the mushroom and the rock, actually have extra little flat plates of metal that you can add in as you're die cutting them, but then use your rubber embossing mat with them and you'll get the detail into them as well. So you could make a complete card even with mushrooms and stuff without even using any of the stamps as well, which is really nice. And then also as extras you're getting this large A2 kind of sized frame die that has the straight edge rectangle around it and then the gorgeous intricate frame in the centre, and you're also getting 3 words as well that say "You are magic," and you can actually use some of these words within the stamps that are in this month's set as well. So you can snip out or swap out some of the actual words within the sentiment, or you can you know, like build your own basically and completely make up a new sentiment, which is great. So let's have a look at the stamp set first. Have I got a piece of card? So, sorry my stamps are a little dirty, but I've been using them to make my cards. So, let's have a look at all of the gorgeous fairies first. So this one I didn't actually use because I was trying to show you a few ideas of where you didn't have to use a fairy on a card if you don't want to. But this one is beautiful. Look at her like tatty kind of skirt, which could be made out of like flower petals. And then she's got the magic wand, which you have that little this piece to sort of go around the end of the magic wand to show it's kind of shining or magic's happening. And then you've got beautiful little delicate wings on her as well, and I love her short hairstyle on this one, so that's a really lovely fairy. Then we also have this one which is kind of hard to see because I didn't put it back on the stamp set properly, but you'll see her on one of my cards. And her skirt, I did actually colour it green to go with the card that I was making, but it kind of reminds me of a pine cone. The way the little pieces are kind of curved on the end and then like curling up a little bit, looks a bit like a pine cone to me. She's got more like butterfly kind of wings. They've got like the 2 lobes to each of the wings, and she's got a longer kind of hairstyle and a beautiful flowy kind of top part to her dress. And then we've also got this gorgeous little fairy down here who's got a flower crown on, and I think her wings, they're different again, aren't they? They're maybe kind of a cross between, like more skinny like these ones, but they might be more butterfly wings with the second lobe on the bottom as well. And she's actually sitting. So on my card I did actually sit her on the rock, but she can also sit on the mushroom or on the edge of this flower, or even like on this flower as well. So she's quite versatile in the amount of different places that you could place her on something. Or you could even, because you have the die to cut her out, and you could have like a sentiment strip going underneath, you could make like a banner going across the card with the sentiment on, and she could be sitting on top of it as well. Maybe try and make it so her legs go between 2 of the words, or you know, maybe there's a break in the sentiment and her legs sort of go between it or something. Or she could just be sitting on the end of it as well. So lots of different ways of adding her to different designs for a card to make it look really different. And obviously this one, she's kind of not standing because her feet aren't flat, but actually, no, I think she'd look a bit funny if you made her stand that way. She's kind of more hovering, like in a vertical fashion, and then this one is more like in flight, going sideways, kind of reminds me of Peter Pan flying across the sky. So you know, she could be in more motion filled kind of cards. This one I actually just used by herself with the die cut frame, and then obviously this little girl or fairy I sat on the rock, but you could easily do it the toadstool or the flowers as well. So talking of the toadstool and the flowers, you've got that gorgeous toadstool. Sorry, mine's really dirty. I stuck it on my stamp platform and I hadn't cleaned it, so it's got like little bits of ink on the back of it. but it's a beautiful toadstool or mushroom kind of a stamp. A really nice decent size as well. I kind of wish they'd given us a smaller one too, to give that perspective to your scene, but it's a really lovely mushroom. And actually, if you've got shrink plastic, you could stamp that on there and colour it in and shrink it down, and then you would have a smaller version as well. And you could even do it as like make it into earrings or something, or a necklace, and have that as part of the card, so that the small mushroom's part of the design, but it could also be an extra element that someone could take off and use and wear as well. Then we have this beautiful flower, which I was trying to colour it as a daisy to begin with, but I wasn't very good at my trying to blend pink into white for the ends of it, so I just turned it into a pink kind of a flower. It could be a sort of gerbera or something as well, and I actually placed this flower on top of this cluster and kind of made it look like this blade of grass was the stem for this flower as well. So you could place that in a couple of different areas on here to make the floral arrangement larger, or you could just use the flower by itself if you want to, or even I guess you could use it with like either this one or one of the dies of the little foliage pieces and create your own kind of stem for it. Or if you like drawing and adding extra details to your card, you could easily draw a little stem coming off of there as well for another kind of look. Then this is the main sort of focal foliage piece. I'm not 100% sure what this flower is, but it's beautiful. It's got like a kind of trumpety sort of design to it. And then there's smaller little flowers here, some tiny little almost daisy-like flowers, another one here, there's a little bud as well. And then sort of either could be the side view of one of these flowers, or it's more like a little bell kind of flower. So a nice little mixture within there. It really looks like wildflowers, which you would probably find fairies living around, so perfect for the stamp set. And also a nice lot of different sort of foliage behind it, so you can use lots of different green tones to give depth and definition between the different blades and stuff. So you've got like more larger leaves, curly edged ones, really straight ones, skinny ones, and then you've also got the foliage that's part of the flowers as well, with like the leaves on as well. So that is a really gorgeous stamp. And then the other kind of image stamps are the little rock, that again you have the die to cut that out, and you can also emboss the detail onto the stamped one that you cut out, or you could just emboss it onto your plain card and like use mousse or ink to pick out the embossed detail. And then you also get two little dragonflies as well, and I think they're exactly the same design but flipped the opposite way, and then one's made smaller, so they go really nicely together to create like a couple of little dragonflies on your card. Or on one of mine I used them all over in the background, but used a tone on tone kind of ink, so they're sort of more pushed into the background rather than being really like prominent on the card. And then obviously you get that lovely little scattering of like fairy dust or magic. I really like that one too, works really nicely for an ethereal kind of background. And then other than the solid foliage one that I pointed out before, the rest of the stamps on here are all of the sentiments. So you get a lot of lovely sentiments which can be used with these or with other stamps from previous stamp clubs as well. You've got nice day, because you've got have a fairy, so you can do have a fairy nice day or have a fairy happy birthday. Then you've got hey friend you sparkle, sending magic your way, you're such a fungi to go with the little mushroom, I love you very much, make a wish, and wishing you a magical day. Which the wishing you a magical day, you could easily like substitute magical day for birthday as well, and I mean even have a fairy magical day as well. So there are lots of different ways you can mix and match your sentiments to make your cards look different. Like if you're making a batch of cards, you might want to just change up the sentiments a little bit, and you can sort of mix and match and stuff, which is lovely. Then the die set, let's first of all show you which ones match the stamp. So if I come in a little bit closer, then I'll show you how they go around them. And I've shown this in lots of the other Stamp Club videos. These dies are the good type of dies that completely, I won't do it on that one actually, I'll zoom in on another one because that stamp's not put back on the packaging very well and it's dirty. So if I zoom in on her, you can see how you can stamp and colour your gorgeous fairy, and then you can cut her out without having to worry about getting the die in the wrong place and having a bigger white border in one place than another, because you can actually see the whole stamp design through the die, so it makes it really, really easy for you to line up your dies when you're going to cut them out. So I really love that they've been doing this more, because it really does help, and it means you're not worried about, you know, if you've spent I don't know how long colouring an image, you know, it can be from somewhere from like 10 minutes to half an hour depending on what medium you're using or how steady your hand is or something. You don't really want to risk cutting it out and not having it like perfectly cut out. So these kind of dies are brilliant because you can easily line them up. So you get one for each of the fairies and one for the little sitting fairy. Then you also get one for the rock and one for the toadstool and one for this gorgeous daisy as well. It's quite easy to line that one up as well. Sometimes they're difficult because of the like asymmetry of the flower and all the petals are different, but because this one's got like shorter petals one side and they come longer the other side, it's quite easy to line that one up, which is good. And then you also have both of the little dragonflies. So you've got the baby dragonfly and the large dragonfly as well. So you can do either of those, die cutting them out. And then finally, the last one that coordinates is that large floral image as well. And I think this floral design, I'm pretty sure all the Stamp Club is drawn by the same designer. So I recognise this style of flowers for this central floral design. So have a look back at any of your other Stamp Clubs that you have and see which ones would kind of match together with this, and you might get even more possibilities of layouts and designs for your cards as well, mixing and matching previous ones with all of these. Then these two, like I was telling you earlier, also come with this little extra piece of metal. So it is literally a really thin piece of metal, like 1 millimetre thick, that's got these different shapes in it. And the idea is that you would die cut the shape and then you can emboss this piece into it. I would just tape them both together and die cut it and then emboss it with your rubber mat. But if you're worried about the dies crossing over, you can die cut first and then emboss the shape as well. And then you can either colour and like colour these bits lighter or darker, the bits that pop up, or you could use coloured cardstock and then use mousse or ink on a blending tool to like pick out the detail on that as well. And then the mushroom has a similar effect to it as well. I mean with this one you could stamp it, die cut it and then emboss it. I don't think it would interfere with the detail too much, but with the mushroom I was going to use this on the one that I was doing, but it doesn't match up with the spots that are on the mushroom. So I wasn't sure whether to do it. I thought it might look a bit weird if you've already got stamped spots and then you emboss it with different spots on it. But I mean, the idea behind it is that you could just use this as a die cut if you want to. You could even do it twice. Cut it once from like the oyster grey cardstock would work really nicely, and then do the top from like the cherry red, and then use a white gel pen or white Nuvo drops or stone drops to add all of the little spots on there as well, or even a white pigment ink to like ink over the top of the raised areas too. So that would look really nice. Then the rest of the dies, I'll move this over to the side. Don't want to lose any of them. Oh, I put that the wrong way around, that's why it won't fit. Okay, then the rest of the dies, you have got these two lovely solid foliage pieces, which I was just cutting out of, did I cut them out of coloured card? No, I think I cut them out of white card and coloured them with the pens, because I was using the pens to colour the rest of the images on the card. But you can easily do them out of coloured card as well, and they look lovely. And even if you really liked the silhouette stamp of the foliage here, that one is different to these two. So you could actually cut these out of funky foam, create your own stamps, and have 3 solid foliage stamps for creating a background as well, which would look really nice. Then you also have the words, so you get this gorgeous U with a really lovely swirly scripty kind of font, and then R and magic. I think R is a really nice word to have. I don't think I have a die set that has the word R as a separate die. because it's kind of a word that you don't really think about needing on a card, but I reckon it's going to come in handy a lot of the time, having that little R, because you can build up a different sentiment with some of the other word dies that you might have in your stash, not just the U and magic. I think that's going to be a really useful one. And then finally, the last like main die from this set is this gorgeous rectangle one that creates this beautiful frame. But again, it's a verso die, so you can just use the rectangle to cut your card base out, or as a matte layer onto a larger card. And then you've got the beautiful intricate detail all the way around the edge that you can create a frame or a shaker. You can do 2 of these, flip one up the other way, and give even more of like a full foliage kind of frame around a card as well. It looks beautiful. And I will just measure this for you. So it is 3 7/8 by 5 1/8. So it will fit, it will matte and layer really nicely onto an A2 card, and it will also matte and layer nicely onto an A6 card, although you will need to trim the dimensions a little bit to make it like even all the way around it. But it's a really lovely size of rectangle. My favourite size is 4 by 5 1/4, so it is a tiny bit smaller than my favourite size, which actually, what was that? Was that, I think it was a kit, wasn't it, that you got 2 of this kind of size, and I said it was my favourite size die. If you got that kit, this one would be like the perfect next layer down. So that would be really nice. You'd have like a proper, you could either do a really skinny frame, or you could use the die from that kit and from like mirror card or something, and then matte your layer onto that and have a really skinny border around the edge. That would be really good. Anyway, I just remembered that die. So this one has got beautiful detail in it, and you can just cut this straight into the card if you're doing a bigger design where you want more space around the edge. Maybe if you are doing a shaker, you might want more space, so you don't have to use skinny bits of foam tape around there. Or another thing, if you're doing a shaker and you still want that kind of frame to it, but you don't want to have to do the tiny skinny bits of foam tape, you could cut this, use like a narrow foam tape, I suppose, and do your shaker all the way around it. But then you could cut this as an aperture out of another piece of card and place it over the top, so you still get that kind of framed sort of look, but you don't have to use skinny bits of foam tape. So that's another way of doing like a shaker card with this gorgeous panel. But I will show you this on a couple of cards. I had fun creating a couple of cards earlier today with this one. So, oh yeah, I also wanted to say, the brand new Tonic Nuvo pens are launching the same day as this die set. So I'm planning on putting this video up, obviously the day you're seeing it. Then tomorrow I will put up my up-close video on the brand new Tonic or Nuvo alcohol pens. It's going to be more of like, here's a comparison to the old ones and how they're different and stuff, so that you can have an in-depth look at them if you're interested in upgrading your pens or you might not have seen them before. But all of the samples that I'm going to show you are coloured with the brand new Nuvo alcohol markers, and I've really been enjoying them. They're very Copic looking. They're practically identical size to a Copic marker, and I love that they have the names and the numbers on the lids of the pens, and it's so much easier to see what colour you're using when they're just spread out across your desk. So like if you just have them like this, you can instantly see from the ends, or if the label's up the right way, you can instantly see what colour it is, whereas the old ones, it was hard to see which colour you were using, and also the lids are easier to get on and off as well. So there will be a full in-depth up-close video on these pens tomorrow if you're interested in them, and then I'll put my sped up video for the Stamp Club up the day after, just so you know. So let's have a look at some samples. Okay, so I've got 5 different samples to show you. The first 2 were just me having fun earlier this afternoon, and the other 3 are the ones that will be in my sped up video. So I've tried to give you a little bit of inspiration using the fairies and not using the fairies as well, just in case you're not as keen on the fairies, or you want to make a card for someone who's not as keen on fairies as well, but you can still use this set to do that. So the first one I wanted to show how nicely the two of them, or the two frames, one flipped up the wrong way, layer together. Annoyingly, I started sticking the words down when it was up the wrong way. I meant to put it this way up because then the mushroom and this is the right way up on the front frame, but when I was sticking the words on, I started sticking them up the wrong way. I had the panel up the wrong way, but I think it works really nicely this way up as well. Even though that mushroom is upside down, it's not really too, like, I mean, you could have a mushroom growing upside down. This could be like in a cave and the grass is growing from the ceiling and the mushroom's there, so it can kind of work either way. And I wanted to show you how you can just use the lovely die cut sentiments. This is almost all die cuts, just a little bit of stamping in the background, but how you can just use the sentiments to create a really lovely card as well. And just showing you the flipping it round and giving you well, it is a symmetrical look, isn't it? But because you've got one out of one colour and one out of another colour and you've layered them up on top of each other, it kind of gives a different look to the card and gives like a fuller foliage kind of look. And the dark green one, I sprayed with a watered down sparkle spray. I think it was a purple one actually, but it looked really nice on this dark card. So it's a very sparse kind of sparkle. And then the foreground one, I actually used the Green Envy Glimmer Paste on it, and then as I was adding the paste to it, I had it on another piece of card, so it was actually this way up from the actual frame, and I placed it onto a piece of white card and then tapped over the top of it. So you've actually got this piece, which is the start of another card, and actually when you do it this way round, that mushroom is more noticeable, but that could be the start of another card that you could actually trim out the centre of this aperture if you wanted to, and give that full kind of effect. You could even come back in with a pen and draw in some more detail to all of these pieces, and then maybe come in with your alcohol markers and colour it in. I think that would look really nice actually, adding like red to the mushroom, like a pinky purple to the flowers, different green tones to all of the foliage, or adding in black outlines to make it really striking as well. I think that would be a really cool way of using it that's really different as well. So I thought I'd show you that because I thought it would be quite a nice idea. And then I wanted to keep the rest of this card really simple. So for the background, I just took some Tumbled Glass Distress Oxide and one of the large Nuvo ink blending brushes. Did a little bit of ink blending sort of down the centre of the panel. Then I took that gorgeous little starry, sparkly kind of stamp, stamped it on top with the same colour, so it's really kind of subtle. And then I came back in with a Nuvo glitter marker, the Arctic Blast, and watered some of it down and then flicked that on the background as well. And actually thinking about it, where I've used the Glacier paste on the outside here, if you don't have Glacier paste and you might have a Nuvo glitter marker, that would have worked just as nicely to add that gorgeous glittery effect to the cardstock. So you know, just think about other products that you have that have a gorgeous glittery finish to them. You might not have all of the pastes and stuff, but if you've got some glitter markers, you can get a sparser glitter marker look by scribbling some out onto your mat and adding water to it, and then you can watercolour with it and it will be much more of a dispersed kind of sparkle. Or you can get this like really in your face kind of sparkle that the glimmer paste gives from using the glitter marker neat from the pen as well. So there's different ways of getting this gorgeous glittery effect too. And then if you've added glitter and stuff, you can use the Hey Friend You Sparkle sentiment as well. So that leads me on to the next card. Again, I was using the die cut frame, and this time I layered 3 of them up. So I again used the Glacier paste on the top light green one. The dark green one underneath was a sparkle spray, but it was a full strength sparkle spray, so it came out very sparkly. And then sandwiched in between those, I also put a white one in there as well, and then I just offset them. I didn't offset them up or down at all. I literally just moved it like a millimetre to one side, and then, I mean, you can see the increments on this side here, and those bits were hanging out on this side, but I trimmed them off so that you just have the light green frame going around the edge. And I think it just gives a slightly different look. It gives that more like depth and stuff to the card, I think. Especially on the mushroom, like the holes in the mushroom look really kind of dimensional, and the grass as well. And then I have just added one gorgeous little fairy on top of here. I added a little bit of glitter marker to her wings and the Glacier paste to her skirt, and you can see there's not too much of a difference between the type of glitter or the mica-y kind of impact that they give. So you really can, like, for these kind of cards, adding, you know, like to the outside or to an image, you can really sort of use a glitter marker and glacier paste interchangeably, which is nice. And then the background of this one, I did my kind of like faux bokeh kind of look with the Nuvo alcohol pens, just using a couple of the purple tones. I've also used in some of these, like this one here, I've used the Opal, I think it's Opal Quartz Aqua Shimmer, which gives like a pinky kind of reflective quality with the mica that's in there. And then the other sparkle that you see in the purple in the background is the Wild Lavender Nuvo glitter marker. I just scribbled it onto my glass cutting mat and watered it down, and then watercoloured some like large orby shapes in there and also splattered some on, and that's when I used it on her wings as well. So she's kind of more of a purpley greeny kind of fairy, but I don't know if you can see it as well, the pine cone kind of look from the skirt. I know I've coloured it green, but if you did it brown, I think it really does look like a kind of pine cone. So I've also used the Hey Friend You Sparkle, because there's so much sparkle on this card. So I thought that was another a different way of showing you how you can kind of layer up that frame die. So you can do like a triple shadow to give gorgeous dimension, or if you want it fuller, you can flip one up the other way and use it as well. And you could have added a fairy in the centre of this one too, or you could have put those words in the centre of this one. So, you know, interchangeably you can use them. And then these three are in my sped up video, so I put more time into these, especially with the colouring. This one, obviously, I had to use that You're Such a Fungi sentiment, and I thought, why not just make the whole background with the mushrooms? So I've done loads of mushroom stamping all over the background and used the new alcohol pens to colour them in. And then for the focal toadstolly mushroom, I've cut it out with the coordinating die, which gives that beautiful little kind of lipped effect around the edge. And then I've used the chalk white stone drops on the dots on the mushroom, just to give them like a little bit of dimension and to make them look a little bit different from the background ones as well. And I think that works really nicely. And I mean, it did take a little while to colour them all in, but it's quite relaxing just colouring the same image multiple times. And I think it's a really nice, simple, kind of masculine looking card as well. And I've also splattered on a little bit of mousse just because I had some left over from the other cards that I was doing. Then let's show this one next. So this is another one using the fairy, and this is where I've sat her on the rock at the bottom. For the background on this one, and also the background in this one as well, I was using an old slightly splayed out kind of brush and dry with no water on it, and two Nuvo embellishment mousses, and giving like a stripy or strokey kind of effect on the background. This one is powder blue, which is quite an old colour. And this one is the Polar Wind, which I think came out in the White Wonderland colour trend, but I thought they'd go really nicely together. This is a really pale blue tone, and this one's kind of more of like a dusky, almost grey blue, especially when it comes out of the pot. It's more of a grey kind of blue, and I thought it would go really nicely as kind of like a sky sort of background. Then also in the background on this one, this is the one I was telling you about where I stamped the dragonflies, and I used Midnight Surf. I think this might have been in the Blue Blossom set of ink pads, but I'll make sure I link the correct set below in case you're after the Midnight Surf. Then I have coloured and die cut out multiple of the images from the set. So I've used that beautiful cluster of flowers, and then that large kind of daisy gerbera kind of flower, and you can see how perfectly, if you put the flower far enough down, you can't really tell that this is a blade of grass. It just looks like a stem for the flower, and it kind of adds height to the design as well. So I mean, if you were doing a landscape card, this kind of height of this focal image would be perfect, and especially like bringing the scene out and having the fairy off to the side. But when you're doing a portrait card, you might want a bit more height, and adding that flower on there really helps with that. And then I was, you'll see in the video, I'll probably leave it in, that I was kind of umming and ahhing where to put the fairy, because in my mind I had imagined I would sit her on top of this flower, but then she'd be way above the card, which would have worked for a DL card, but I'd already done the background to go for an A2, A6 kind of size. And so then I thought, well, I could sit her on here, but I'd already coloured this flower purple, and then she was purple, so I was like, well, she can't really sit on the purple flower because she'll kind of blend in. So I'd coloured a couple of the rocks, you know, just in case I wanted to use them. So I thought, well, I might as well add her to the foreground and she can sit on a rock, and then she is like the main focal point of the card then, and she's not sort of more hidden up in the foliage and the flowers. She's more like right in the forefront. And these fairies are very dainty, but the new Nuvo pens have got like a really fine bullet nib on them, and you can actually get into those tiny little flowers on her headdress and stuff relatively easily when you're using a pen that's got that fine kind of nib to it. Or if you would rather watercolour, I'm sure you could have like a tiny little paintbrush and get into all of those little details as well. So the pens are really great for getting into the detail if you like using your alcohol pens. And then to finish this card off, after sort of building up a little scene there, I've used the Have a Fairy Happy Birthday for this one. And then finally I added on some Nuvo drops. And I really neglect my jewel drops, so I thought I would use a few jewel drops on this one because they sort of, they kind of highlight the brush strokey effect in the background and bring in a little bit more of a blue tone. That's kind of matching her wing colour. And this was Sea Breeze, this one. I think this is one of the original jewel drops. But really lovely, translucent, a really light blue kind of a colour. And then the final card that I did, again I have used the stone drops on the little spots on the mushroom or the toadstool, and it's the chalk white stone drops. So stone drops come in bottles like this, and they have that gorgeous texture in them. Really looks like gritty and like stone. And then basically I've just coloured everything in the same way, and again, like I said before, yeah, I cut them from white card and just coloured them with the pens that I'd been using, so all of the greenery matches and it doesn't look too like harsh between just a die cut that doesn't have a black outline around it. Sometimes if you cut die cuts like this from a coloured card and then your colouring doesn't quite match, like the tones aren't quite right, it can be really noticeable that you've put die cuts with stamped and cut out images, and I don't often like that look. I mean, you might like the look, but it often bugs me. So a way to get around that is to cut your die cuts from white card and then use one of the colours that you've used in the colouring to colour them in. So if you'd used your aqua flows or watercolours, just use one of those to colour in your foliage pieces as well, and it just blends together nicer, I think, anyway. And I've literally just built up a whole scene inside a circle aperture. I love doing cards like this. One of my favourite designs of card, I think, if I could only make one design of card for like the rest of my life, it would be this size with a circle in that top like 2/3 of the card. I really love this style because you can do so much with it, and you can even have like extra things like coming out the edges here. Like, I mean, if there had been a little snail in this set, you could have had the little snail crawling around the aperture or something. I just love this kind of a card. And I wasn't going to put the sentiment wonky on it, but because the mushrooms are red and they're the only red thing on the card, it was really off balance, I think, just having these two, because originally I wasn't going to put this one here and I was going to have the sentiment straight across, but I was like, it looks too off balance that there's just two of them because they're so sort of in your face, because I did them really bright red. So I decided to do the sentiment wonky and add another mushroom down there, and I really like how that looks actually. I wasn't sure it was going to work nicely, but I do really like how it turned out. So, you know, that's a nice little way of using the mushrooms and bringing them outside of the scene as well. And then also on the aperture portion of this card, I did splash on some of the mousses that I'd been using in the background as well, just to tie the background into the foreground to finish off the card. So these three are in my sped up video, and then these two were just the two extra ones that I decided to do just to have fun and play with the set. So I really hope you enjoyed this up close video. I hope it gave you a few ideas of maybe card ideas of how to use the fairy or not use the fairy. But I mean, any of these you could easily add the fairy in or take the fairy out, depending if there's already a fairy on the card, because I mean, she would fit lovely sitting on the toadstool in this card. That would kind of, I don't know, I'm thinking Thumbelina because, you know, she's like small sitting on a toadstool, but I think she'd look really sweet sitting in this card as well. But equally, you could not have put her in this card, you could have put the words in this card, then you could have had the flying fairy flying across the sky in this card, maybe even tucked partly behind the foliage, so it looks like she's sort of, I don't know, you're looking at her through a sort of frame of foliage from somewhere and you can see her flying off in the distance. Or, I mean, even on this one, she could be sitting on that toadstool, or the flying one could be flying by, or the hovering one could be hovering as well. So, you know, there's lots of ways of adding the fairies in if you like fairies or if the recipient likes the fairies, but there's also lots of options to just create a nice card for like a gardener or even a chef. Like if you've got a chef that loves using mushrooms in their dishes, this kind of a card would be brilliant for them. Or a gardener who, you know, loves all of the gorgeous wild kind of flowers in their garden as well. I mean, obviously switching out the sentiment to match the kind of person or style of card that you've done. But I think it's quite a nice versatile set, and especially with all those sentiments in it as well. And the main rectangle die too. It's a really nice staple to have in your stash, and you can see if it'll coordinate. If you didn't get that kit that I mentioned earlier, you might have another one in your stash that is a similar size as well that it might work with to be a nice little matte layer too. So I hope you enjoyed this up close video, and thank you so much for watching and staying right till the end of the video. And I hope you have a lovely day, and I will see you again in the next video. Bye!